Are are we live? Yes, so we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a classic Saturday stream. As you can see today, we are finally getting back into talking about Dungeons and Dragons with another classic story time. Though today's title might not be something any of you recognize quite yet, it is an important name to know going forward, I suppose. But, before we get into all of that, how are all of you doing? How are your weekends going? Any amazing plans coming up? Anything exciting about to happen? How are you all? Ah, I do have a bit of news myself. I have some family coming into town next weekend. And unfortunately, that may mean a disruption to next week's streaming schedule. I will be going out to meet my sister's kid for the first time, basically meeting my nephew, now that everything's kind of settled down a bit since his birth. And so it is very likely, particularly next Saturday, for things to be a little off schedule. I will try to see what I can do while approaching that weekend to make things up to you all, but it's very likely next weekend will just have to be a loss so that I can meet up with family and do my own weekend things, as many of you know. Milk approach and art made me wonder how Juniper's comic manga is coming along. Yeah, I haven't heard much about that whole comic book that Juniper was working on in a while. So I'm curious if that's just been silently moving along or if her latest project has been stealing away quite a bit of time from that. I had to work all day, so not great, but now I'm here, so it's getting better. Hell yeah, sour cake. Glad to hear you're getting out. Is it your usual work time, or did you get scheduled for more things than you expected? Things are well, things are well, things are well. Well, thank you, Terramon, for reaffirming that so many times. Probably for her anniversary stream as well as her military or office model. Yeah, no, I'm very excited to see this model when it finally comes out. And I have heard rumblings about a bunch of other fun things going on with the reveal, some extra elements, and maybe some brand new environments going on Juniper's end of things. It is all super exciting. It was normal work, just didn't want to do it. Yeah, nah, I get you. A lot of work, hell yeah. And there is some exciting news, though, coming up, as we are very close to Spooktober. And with that, I'm going to have to do a bit of work myself to get a recent design fully implemented and where it needs to be. I think all of you hanging out likely know what I'm talking about, but coming up soon, we might have an opportunity to see something rather terrifying on screen. Something just with the right energy for Spooktober. all right. So, it has been a little while, so I imagine we'll have to do a bit of a recap. So let's get things moving along. Ah, the old fireplace. It has been a while, hasn't it? Let's see. Are we all lined up? Are we all ready? Are you all excited for a bit of story time? Do you have your drinks, your snacks, a comfortable chair? Are you ready to hear what happens to the intrepid heroes of the party as they chase after some classic bandits? Ah, there we go. Should move this down just a bit. That should work out a little better. I just love watching things burn. Hell yeah. Right, that reminds me. The Tardy Terra stuff will be finished by next weekend. I thought it would be cool for a stream, but I guess it's just for you then. Oh, okay, Marcial. Yeah, no, I'm sorry that my next weekend is being a little bit scrambled up by family stuff. But I'll certainly find an opportunity to show off your artwork. I'm very excited to see the Tarot Tardy. I have not seen any hint of what's happening, so I really hope to be just totally blindsided by whatever comes out. You have been working on a lot of art, Marcial, lately, and all of it has been turning out really good looking. But, perhaps it's time for us to gather in to prepare for just a bit of a new story time. First, of course, we will want to recap what has happened last session, as that was well over a week ago. So then, where did leave off? Well then, the music is way too loud now. Don't worry about that. The music is just clearing out so that we can make room for a more proper energy. Bring in the sounds of the crackling fire, a calmness on the air. Where we left off last time, the party had arrived in Otton. They had witnessed, and of course I will stay hydrated. They had witnessed a hanging in the town square and learned a bit about the energy of this war-torn kingdom. An excitement lives in Otton, a firm belief in this nation pushing back and in its dedication to the war effort. The party was able to fully gather themselves, as Rassmusen had finally awoken from his strange coma-like state, and had learned a bit about what had happened, being introduced to the party's latest member, the elven wizard Villandria. Spending some time in the city, grabbing a resp and a show, the party would get themselves a new job in hand, though one with a certain layer of warning about it. A simple bandit job, a ways outside the city, though the guild hall did inform them that this job had been submitted well over a week ago. It seems with the energy in the city, with the war about, and with an influx of more factional jobs at the guild hall, fewer and fewer adventurers have been stopping by to take missions. So it is possible that this job is entirely a red herring, the village having dealt with the bandits on their own, after all. Or perhaps the bandits had simply disappeared into the night, given plenty of time to run away. The morning of the hanging, the Laundria would push for the party to leave. She had no great desire to remain in this city for another moment and wanted to clear her head. A hanging was not something she had been used to seeing. Executions in her mind were a dark affair, and yet here they were spectacle. The party would gather themselves and depart from the city, making their way out into the wilds of Taverfia, following their directions south then eastward to the village that had requested help. What would lay ahead for the party? There has been a sense of growing tension, a curiosity, a confusion. Tortuga and the party had agreed to help the Taverfian mercenaries make their way to Otton, though his interest seems tied directly to the mysterious figure known as the Judge of Pelor. And yet none of the party know who this person is or why Tortuga might be pursuing them. The Laundria stint into the woods on their journey and seeing the strange masked figures taking part in the execution has set her on edge here in Taverfia. Something seems rotten in her eyes, something that has led to great violence to spread. Now then, with the questions asked, with the party departing from the city, with the road rising and falling as they travel, it is time to delve deep into what today's tale holds for us, and if we are lucky, to learn what Der Sethek might mean. Traveling along the road, the party moves for several hours. It should be a half-day's travel out to this village, and then, of course, a half-day's travel back. So they should probably make preparations once they arrive to spend the evening, or else they will have to camp it out in the woods, wherever they end up dealing with this banditry. But as they travel, Tortuga grows more and more quiet, moving into his own mind, thinking about what must come next. He glances about at his party members as they all travel, each of them with a bit of a different energy. Malachite skipping along, a bit happy to be moving. The city was exciting for her, seeing a hanging, a great entertainment, but there's something about having a job that balances her out even more. Rassmusen is relaxed, not really paying much attention to what goes on around him in this moment. He is a well-worn mercenary, a man who sets his mind to a job, but is very easy to relax it into simple enjoyments. Pharaoh follows along, the mysterious figure that Tortuga has come to appreciate. Her magics had kept him alive in more than one fight, though as he thinks about it, he realizes there's a lot he does not know about her. The Laundria, the newest addition, this strange elvish woman. She seems very driven, yet she seems very dour today. Her mood has not lifted much since they left the city. Something weighs on her, and even Tortuga can see this. And finally Perch, the stoic man wearing his heavy armor. Always quick to jump into a fray, yet awkward at times in conversation. Tortuga thinks back and realizes he's actually never seen a man without his helmet on. never seen him unprepared for comment. As Tortuga takes in his party, he begins to think about why he has come here. Chasing a rumor of a man. Seeing the banners of a memory. Tortuga finds himself distraught, wondering, can he really do this with all of these people not knowing? They had never hesitated to jump into a fray. So far, they had never not backed another's plan. What could it be? And yes, hello, Instant ZZ. I do use Asgar's map. Let's see. As Tortuga looks about, he stops moving. Stops dead in the middle of the road. The party continues their march as Pharaoh turns and looks at the now still Tortuga. Slowly, everyone begins to realize that the party has stopped moving as they turn towards Tortuga, waiting. Something wrong? Rassmusen asks. Tortuga starts to shake his head, then his shaking slows and stops as he gives a quick nod. There's something I need to tell you all. The reason I came here, why I agreed to help those mercenaries make it to Otton. There's something that drew me here. Has something to do with that judge fella, right? Rassmusen asks, taking Tortuga aback for a moment. He looks up at Rassmusen. Well, I saw how you grew more interested in them when they began talking about the man. Right, Pharaoh states. You also have been, well, rather obvious in your curiosity about the banner. When you disappear, or when you look up at them, it's kind of obvious that you are interested in it. I guess that's true. Tortuga looks down at his feet for a moment, sees them rising and falling, nervously pacing about in place. He takes a deep breath as he looks up around them slowly. We're all a party, right? We're all willing to hear each other out, to understand what's happening. Well, I only joined recently, Melandria says. But I would hope so, right? Perch approaches Tortuga and says, what is it? We are on the same side here. Very well, Tortuga states. And the truth is, I've come here to kill the judge of Pelor. The silence stretches on for a moment. Tortuga looks up, waiting for Rassmusen to perhaps laugh it off, or for a sudden deluge of questions. But there's just a moment of extended silence. Rassmusen is the first to speak, but His question isn't something to cast what he has set aside, something befuddled or baffled by Tortuga's statement. Why? Rassmusen states. I think, Tortuga begins, I think he killed my family. What do you mean? You think he killed your family? Suddenly, every member of the party begins moving in towards Tuga. Here, the deluge of questions come, yet it is different. It is not baffled, angry, confused. It is concerned. Something Tortuga was not ready for. He feels something welling up inside him. He raises a hand to his face to calm himself for a moment, then begins to speak again. I guess I don't really know who the judge is, or maybe I do. I'm not sure yet, but his banner, I think, is... His banner is my home. What? The banner is your... What do you mean? I grew up in a small village with a church of Pelor on a hill, Tortuga states. Until one day, a group came and they burnt it to the ground. They killed most of my family, and then Tortuga feels his hand scratching at the bandage at his wrist. And then they sold me into slavery. So I want to kill the judge of Pelor. The quiet returns for a moment. Looking about, Tortuga sees Perch, stoic, but give a momentary nod, seeming to be digesting what Tortuga had just stated. Fro is quiet, though her eyes pierce into Tortuga, searching for something, yet she does not ask. Malachite seems entirely unshaken by this, but Valandria and Rass seem suddenly very concerned. You do realize this man is some sort of folk hero for them, right? Like, tied into the military, he's got guards, he's got armies, he's known everywhere. Do you think he might be the man who burnt your village to the ground? I know I don't really have any facts yet, but how would you do it? Valandria states. What? Rassmusen makes a very good point. This man is certain to be well guarded, though I doubt he is exactly military. He sounds more like a mercenary. So perhaps he has his own camp, but still. He is a skilled soldier, if the stories are to be believed, and will undoubtedly have some level of guard. How would you kill such a man, Tortuga? Tortuga looks about. Then he holds up one of his hands as he reaches forward. At the same time, he feels his spirit reaching inward, grabbing some of the ki from inside himself. And in a quick flash, he casts 2 spells, or appears to cast 2 spells, instead drawing the energy from himself. First, a minor illusion, causing him to appear just for a moment, like a Taverfian soldier has been created next to him. Stock still, like a mannequin, sure, but a sudden image. At the same time, Tortuga steps back and creates darkness around him, a cloud of impenetrable shadows. As Tortuga disappears into the darkness and the soldier is left there, he claps his hands together and both spells dissipate. I have ways to disappear, to distract. You all know I'm very, stealthy, and I know how to fight, but I'm telling you all this because even though I have these skills available to me, I'm certain I would need help with this. Rassmusen seems to be slowly nodding, coming to terms with some of the details. He still seems concerned, irritated to a degree. Rassmusen is not fully convinced that there is a plan here, and doesn't like the idea of going to a kingdom to immediately try and kill the folk hero there. I'm not entirely convinced, Tortuga, but I'm on your side of this. What do you know about the judge? Not much. I asked about at a church at Sighton, but everything seems to be rumor, lost to a degree. People at the churches praise Pelor for him, but there's no obvious sign he's actually attached to Pelor himself. And if he is the one that burnt my church to the ground, then it doesn't quite make sense him being associated with Pelor. So we don't know much about him, don't know exactly where he is, don't know how strong he is or what kind of guards. And more importantly, Valandria begins to cut through. We do not know if he really is the one who did this to you, Tortuga. I know, but Tortuga looks down at his hands for a moment. I think he is. I sense something. I feel like this is him. Valandria remains unconvinced, but Tortuga does feel some reassurance. They were not as dismissive as he had feared. They were not as unwilling to listen. Rass's concerns seemed all logistic, and as Rass seems to fall into a moment of thought, Tortuga begins to wonder, will you all help me, then, find out about the judge, where he is, what he did, and if so, would you help me with this? Rass begins. I don't like how much we don't know about this, but Tortuga, if we can figure out enough, then I'll be on your side of whatever happens, yeah? Tortuga, Rich states. I don't mind. I'd be excited to kill somebody like that, Malachite states. A very interesting notch in a belt, if you know. Pharaoh steps forward and places a gentle hand on Tortuga's shoulders. It sounds like you need some balance. So I'll be there as well. Finally, Valandria. Again, I would very much like us to be certain, Tortuga, that this man is who you think he is. And for us to consider what happens should we take a stab at him. But I don't wish for you to think I would abandon you. Tortuga lets out a sigh. And slowly the party resumes their travel southward. As they move, Valandria continues to stare at Tortuga, curious about what he had done. She recognized the spells that had been cast. Minor illusion, she figured, and darkness was a rather obvious one. But he did not perform the verbal components expected. The somatic component he used did not seem like anything she'd observed before. She's more than certain that Tortuga does not carry any sort of focus that can be used for arcane arts. She stares, curious about what powers Tortuga might possess. As the party continues onward, all of them lost to a degree in their own thoughts, Malachite cuts through the quiet. She says, "There's smoke up ahead." Everyone's attention is pulled to the distance as a thin trail of black smoke coils up and into the sky. "Oh, please tell me that's not where the village is supposed to be." With that, the party breaks into a sprint down the road, heading in the direction of the winding black smoke. As they follow the trail, it becomes more and more obvious that they are headed in the direction of the village which had called for help. They push through until eventually they stop at the top of a hill and look down at a burnt-out, abandoned village. A thin trail of black smoke goes up from a smoldering pile of wood in the center of town, seeming to be what was once a storage house. It still radiates a level of heat and smoke, though it seems to have long since been fed to an inferno. Corpses lie about alongside buildings, in doorways. Dark blood stains, dried, cover different surfaces and soak into the ground. Dozens of buildings hold the charred marks of fire, arrows broken or abandoned across the fields and in different homes. The party, it seems, is too late. Or rather, the job that was given to them had been delayed for far too long. Slowly, the party descends the hill into the small village and split up to search about. The signs of the attack seem to be at least a day or more old. Blood has long since dried. The fires no longer have true embers, though some heat and coal remain at the center of the biggest buildings, giving off thin trails of black smoke. The corpses are long since beginning to turn bad, hinting that this was maybe more than a day ago. Rassmusen and Malachite begin making a work around the perimeter of the village, looking for tracks, signs of when a group had come in and when and where it had left. Perch and Pharaoh begin making a methodical push through the city, looking over different corpses, searching about for any signs of what exactly had happened here. Tortuga finds himself lost, walking slowly through this burnt village filled with corpses. He looks about at the smoldering ruins, at the slayed villagers. He finds himself approaching a half-burnt stable with a corpse left in the water trough. A single arrow through his chest. Blood pooling in the trough around him. Tortuga stares as his mind begins to reel. A burnt village, corpses. Tortuga finds himself becoming shaky, woozy, just as he is about to collapse. A sound splits through his mind. Focusing, he sees a spray of blood come from the man's mouth and dashes over to him, pulling him from the blood trough and laying him on the ground. His arms and legs dreadfully affected by his extended time in the water trough. The arrow straight through his chest. The blood around the wound seems to have coagulated somewhat. Tortuga wonders how long this man had been left for, how he could be alive. Looking at him, though, the man is doomed. The arrow has definitely punctured something vital. The man had been left here for days, meaning he is sapped of all strength. He is certain to. No. Pharaoh! Tortuga calls. Pharaoh, I need you now! He starts shouting out. He hears the distant fluttering of feathers as Pharaoh takes off from one side of the village and flies across to him. Quickly, save him! Yes, of course, Pharaoh says. She kneels down and softly places her hand on the man's chest, two of her fingers surrounding the arrow. She begins to mutter a quiet prayer. Then her fingers curl around the arrow. In a seemingly violent motion, she tears it from his chest. But where Tortuga expected to hear wrenching sounds, splitting flesh, to see the blood pour once again from his man, instead, coagulated blood around the arrowhead allows it to pull clean through. There's more there than there should be. Blood does not pour from the wound. In fact, the wound seems to be stitching itself up. The magic of Pharaoh's god has successfully saved this man. Short, rough breaths begin to come from him before deep coughs begin emerging. In the excitement, the whole party has begun to gather towards this man as he slowly begins to come to. Eventually his breaths, remaining ragged, becoming deeper and deeper. You're all right, Tortuga says. You're all right. The man's eyes begin to flutter. And slowly they open, looking about at the group in front of him. Am I dead? The man mutters. No, you're not dead. The man's eyes begin to look about the village, seeing the corpses about him, the burnt structures. His eyes close desperately as a groan escapes. They killed everyone. Everyone. Where were you? His eyes open, an anger of fury piercing across them. We asked for help over a week ago. The first attack was over a week ago, and where were anybody? The man begins breaking down into deep sobs. We are sorry, the Laundry Estates. We were only given the job yesterday. The guild, it seems, has been having trouble finding people to go out this far. The party is quiet for a moment as the man begins to weep, looking about, letting the anger wash over him, and then slowly calm down. He eventually sets himself up better, back rested against the trough, the sorrow overtaking him for a moment. Over a week ago, the first of the raiders arrived and started attacking the outskirts. A few of them made it in and made it out with some of our food. We hoped that would be the end of it. We sent out a request for help and thought people would be arriving to deal with the bandits soon. But 2 days ago, they came back again. This time they killed everyone. Everyone. Did you see, how many it was, friend? You were here. In the main group, I don't know exactly, but for those who attacked, there were at least 24 people. All armed, some with bows, some with swords. They tore through us. They took everything. Do you know where they went? They came and went from the woods. The man gestures in the direction. With that, Rassmusen gestures to Malachite to begin searching the edge of the woods there for a trail. But there was one man with them who did not take part in the attack. What do you mean? He stayed at the tree line and he watched. He held a weapon in one of his hands and had it rested on his shoulder. I remember seeing it, even as we were being attacked. It glowed with a faint green light, and he just watched. He watched it all happen. Do you think he might have been a man in charge of this then? It seemed like it. All the rest poured out around him. I don't know if they all went with him or what happened after I was shot, but he seemed to be in charge to some degree. The party begins to discuss amongst themselves. If Malachite can find a trail, this would be easy. They'd be able to track these people down and take care of them. If this attack was only a couple of days ago, and if they really made off with all of the village's supplies, they likely didn't go very far in that amount of time. Though this man who watched from a distance was a bit of a concern. I don't know much about glowing swords in the distance, but to me it sounds kind of like magic. Evil under you? True. I definitely agree. Whoever this man is, he is armed with some sort of enchanted blade, which also hints at the idea of him being the one controlling the group. Do you think this is something you can manage then? Well, I do have some spells of my own that will likely even any magical playing field, but since he wasn't involved in the attack, I have no idea what that weapon might do. A weapon that glows tends to be more than a simple enchantment for sharpness or durability. Very well. We'll have to do this carefully then. Tortuga! As Rassmusen turns around, he sees Tortuga has not left the other man's side. He seems to be staring at the man. I'll go try to help Malachite find this trail. See if there's anything else we need to know from him, and we'll be heading off in about an hour. Right? That Rassmusen walks away as well, leaving Tortuga near to the man, and Pharaoh standing by, should her magic be needed again. I'm sorry this happened to you, Tortuga states. I wish I could have been here to help. I understand you all were not sent until recently. I wish it could have been sooner, but your name is Tortuga, is? Yes, it is. Listen. I need you to do something. When you find these people who killed everyone, show them no mercy. Kill them all. Tortuga finds that his hand is already on the man's shoulder. Don't worry. I'll make sure they suffer for this. The man nods, and slowly he seems to drift into unconsciousness. Pharaoh, is he alright? He needs sleep, Tortuga. He survived being shot and left for dead for 2 days. He just needs to rest. We're killing all of them. Agreed, Pharaoh says. But first we need to find them. The party begins heading in the direction of the woods, where they find Malachite, seemingly excited. She explains that she has definitely found a trail, and that the man was right. There's well over 24 people here, and because of that, they had left a decent enough trail for her to follow. The party sets themselves and begins moving into the woods, following the trail through the trees, tracking these bandits, these raiders, to find them and to deal with them. The trail began very obvious, where the men had charged from the woods to attack the village. But as they go into the trees, it becomes more and more dispersed. It seems whoever these raiders are, they are well managed as. And they made sure to split about, move in a wide formation to hide themselves as well as possible. Whoever this quarry is, they are not simply random raiders, people taking advantage of the war. They seem to be very skilled. But Malachite is even more skilled and guides everyone through the trees until eventually the trails begin to form together again. I think we're approaching their camp, Malachite states. While these people had been dispersed in their travel, as soon as they begin getting closer to a central location, the trails themselves begin to gather together as well, becoming more and more obvious. easier to track. As the party creeps low and pushes forward, something catches Pharaoh's eyes. Some strangeness in the distant trees, and she gestures for everyone to stop. Does this look right to all of you? She gestures to the woods ahead. The whole party gets low and begins looking about. Looking through the trees, there are clumps where trees are growing in patches, overgrown with thick vines. But nothing seems terribly out of the ordinary in these woods. Malachite's eyes narrow. She is more experienced in mountains than in thick forest, but she begins to see something strange. No. That group of trees and that group of trees, they're too well clumped together. The vines aren't growing either, they're draped over them. Those are barricades. Well camouflaged too. Looking through the trees at what Malachite gestures to, no one else in the party is able to see what she is seeing. They just look like groups of trees to me. Yeah, they're very well made. Tortuga narrows his eyes. I cannot seem to make out what Malachite is looking at here. Give me a moment, he says, crouching low and creeping through the underbrush. He begins to head forward, staying silent, staying in the shadows of distant trees. He creeps closer and closer. Until eventually, he arrives within 10 feet of one of these clumps of trees. As he is up close to it, it begins to become more obvious, the man-made nature of these. It looks like trees had been cut down somewhere else. Their base is sharpened and then plunged into the earth, their bark left as intact as possible, and where the bark had fallen away, dirt had been rubbed well into the wood to darken it to a degree. Then vines, foliage, and underbrush were added around the base and over the limbs to give these trees a greater sense of presence here. But they were definitely planted intentionally. As Tortuga takes another step forward, he suddenly realizes he can see between a few of these trunks. Arrow slits had been carved through them. And then he hears a soft voice. No, I'm telling you, Damien, it's your turn to be on watch. Just get the fuck up there and start watching. You know it's boring as hell. It's been days since we did that attack. Yeah, well, we have a job, so get to it. Fucking fine. Suddenly, Tortuga finds himself dropping to the ground as he sees an eye appearing in one of the slits, looking about. This is definitely some sort of fortification. Tortuga silently makes his way back to where the party had stopped, several yards away. Creeping down to where everyone is crouched and waiting, he describes what he had seen, and the party begins making a plan of attack. Listen, if they've got arrow slits and a clear line of sight, that's just begging for us to get shot up if we try to approach too obviously. And unfortunately, half of us are not very good at sneaking up on a structure like that. Rassmusen gestures to the armor that him, Perch, and Pharaoh wear. We'd likely be spotted as soon as we stand up, and we get shot to pieces at range. So, I think what I can do is get noticed. See, I'll start crossing parallel to the walls, heading in a different direction, making a bit of a ruckus, and maybe get all the watchers' attention pulled a bit away from where it needs to be. I want to be... Tortuga kind of gestures around for attention. I can get really close. I was already nearly at the base of the barricades, so if I push up silently, I should be able to surprise them by being already there when the attack begins. I also might have an idea, Valandria states, but I'll have to see if the opportunity presents itself, and how they react to you, Rassmusen. If we're lucky, they might break from their defenses to chase after you. In which case, all of this does become a lot easier. Tortuga nods. If they abandon their defenses, I'll be able to attack them as they run past me. And the rest of you should be able to hope out my quick work of those who get past. The party all nods and settles into their plans. Tortuga's given a minute to begin creeping back up to his previous position, as Rassmusen prepares himself. They all watch as Tortuga stops right at the base of this small wall-like structure. Rassmusen slowly stands and then begins making his way through the woods, cutting parallel to the walls. As he does, Tortuga hears, "Shh, quiet, there's someone out there," and hears a lot of movement behind the barricade. Several people begin to stand and move up to the wall. He sees several sets of eyes peering out, silently watching, as a distant Rass makes his way through the trees. But none of them move out from behind the defensive structure. Tortuga begins cursing under his breath as he looks at this wall, trying to think if he'd be able to make his way up and over it quickly, how to try to displace the defenses, what can be done. They will not be leaving here easily. Little does he know that far behind him, Valandria mutters under her breath, "Well then, I believe it is your chance, Ula." She raises a hand and summons her familiar, the small stoat, into it. "Go on, look as stoat-like as you can, and start moving out there." As she states this, she allows Ulo to hop down and begin crossing through the woods, through the clearings. A single stoat shouldn't arise suspicions, and she suspects he'll be able to make it in and behind the defenses rather easily. So Rassmusen continues his march further and further away, though. Soon Ula is the only thing that those on edge can clearly see. "What's that?" someone states. "Looks like a ferret." True. Is that man coming any closer to us? No, he seems to be just bumbling away. Well then. As Ulo starts to creep up, he remembers the orders of his master and begins to simply move about, trying to look as stoat-like as possible. And it's very convincing behavior. He looks exactly like a simple critter in the woods, right up to the moment that the crossbow bolt pierces through him and he disappears. "They killed Ulo," Valandria says, Pharaoh and Perch looking at her. "What?" Back at the barricade, the man states, "I got it. Hell yeah. I'm gonna fucking grab that thing. There's someone out there. Yeah, so what? They're walking away. Well, that Tortuga looks as one of the bandits walks around the wall, a crossbow hung over his shoulder. He begins to slowly creep out around the side of the small wooden palisade, heading in the direction of where Ulo had been. He's chuckling to himself as he walks out and stops mere feet away from Tortuga. Oh, where are ya? I'm certain I pinned you somewhere around here. Tortuga begins taking one careful step towards the man, then another. Hey, did any of you back there see it? It seems to have disappeared. I can't fucking find it. You sure you hit it? One man says. Yeah, I'm sure. Tortuga is almost at the man when suddenly he sees a light out of the corner of his eye. He looks over as a ball of fire erupts from Valandria's hands and flies through the air towards the man who had killed her familiar. Fucking die, Valandria states as she casts a bolt of fire. The man's eyes raise. Perhaps a sixth sense warning him of danger. Perhaps the glint of light had pulled his attention. But he does not react quick enough as a gout of flame catches him straight in the face and washes over him. The elements of surprise, then, is paid as the man drops from the firebolt, and everyone begins to roll for initiative. And there, I believe, is where we can take a quick recess. How are you all doing? It has been quite a while since we have sat down and had a full story time. Oh, and I have to admit, I am finding it is taking a bit out of me. I will stay hydrated, Terramon. I'm excited to take a bit of a recess. How are you all enjoying the story time? How is my sweet voice doing? And how do you guys think this fight will go? What do you think of the revelation of Tortuga? Oh, Lotus Flower. Nice. Do you remember this fight? If anybody out there in chat has any questions, Lotus Flower is actually the player who plays Tortuga. If any of you have any questions, he is a very good source of information. I more encourage you guys to have a chat with him. I'm ranching my slimes, but this has made excellent background noise. Well, I always aim to be smooth source of entertainment. I think so. Hell yeah, Lotus. So, do any of you have any questions about what has happened so far? Are any of you curious about what has befallen the party, or what will happen next? Or perhaps some of you are curious about this strange figure in the woods. Ah, I have a few questions. What are they, Marcial? What are you curious about? I did see you asking a bit about monsters coming in to clear out the corpses. I would say there are a few things going on in Taverfia right now that have led to a lot of monstrous type creatures not necessarily moving about super freely. The nation is at war, so soldiers are raised. This has led to somewhat drop off in certain behaviors by things that are not in a cleverer direction. Banditry is on the rise as they're clever enough to avoid marching soldiers, but more monstrous or easily dealt with problems are actually dropping off to a degree while soldiers are raised. Since there are hanging songs, are there beheading songs as well? I would say most likely. I imagine, though, there's a larger collection of just general execution songs. Songs probably just about people being executed that are kind of in a very, like, the sort of child song type energy. Just sort of a rhythmic, easy thing that people tend to sing along that's somewhat mocking and, gallows humor style songs. How is everybody else? Oh, Mortis, glad to see you're out there. Yay, story time. Sorry I didn't catch your comment. When I get pretty deep into the stories, I tend to miss a few things that are going on, but I do hope you haven't felt totally abandoned. Ah. The party in D&D consists of various races and classes. Do, for example, bandit gangs also have a few classes? Are they just bandits? When actually making it, there is a single group of enemy types called bandits, though I do tend to flavor them with a few people that tend to fill more specific roles, as you're likely to see as this fight gets going. But there is kind of a general enemy type that is bandit. You definitely can fill it out with a wider variety of races if you would like, though you will have to be careful as some races do have inherent powers. It just becomes very difficult as a DM when you're dealing with a very large group of enemies, say something like 20 bandits, to manage each individual having various different powers and the like. Seeing as party members tend to have a lot to manage on their own terms, the DM wants to try to keep their enemies as simple to manage as possible to make sure the enemy's turns only take a few seconds, allowing combat to flow very quickly and very smoothly, especially when some players are already having to look through full lists of spells. Making sure the enemies aren't the ones taking up extra time in combat becomes a very important element. Yeah, you give important human enemies at least a special item that the party can loot. I imagine the glowing sword being the loot this time around. It's definitely one element of the loot that can be had, and something I was very much hoping the party would go for and pick up. And something that I'm very excited to have more of a talk about. Now, if you will all excuse me for just 2 minutes, I need to actually go grab just another drink to keep myself well lubricated for the next hour of talking. Isn't that a problem for EHAD? I've heard combat in that edition is very drawn out. Fourth edition did have a lot of buffs and debuffs as its main problem. All enemies having kind of one or two things isn't a problem. In fact, I very much enjoyed 4th edition's way of making martial classes feeling much more feature oriented by having a few different attacks they could have every encounter or every day that made them feel kind of in the same fantastical level that casters did. But it definitely caused an issue, not so much having a lot of enemies with a lot of abilities, but having a lot of different buffs and debuffs that you had to manage, to the point that there were over like 5 or 6 different AoE effects happening at once. And last question, how did you make the amazing blood puke sound? I just did. I don't know how to answer that, I guess. I just sort of, I guess, gathered up a significant amount of saliva in my mouth and prepped myself with kind of a strained, dry coughing sound. So I think people already are pretty good at making a sound. So if you just kind of bring some saliva into your mouth, force it to kind of flood certain areas, and then you tilt your head back to make sure you aren't actually spitting anything up, just sort of making sure it only stays within your mouth, and you can force a lot of energy backwards instead of forwards while you're coughing. And this allows things to sound a lot more choked and can let kind of the liquidy sound of your own saliva sound a little unnatural in the way it's kind of resonating. Now then, I'll need 2 minutes of this recess to go ahead and go grab another drink, and then we will continue on ahead with the combat and with seeing what the party discovers at the camp. All right. All right. With Valandria running from the tree lines, burning alive the man who had dared to slay her familiar Ulo, Tortuga stops for a moment. The man he had been creeping up on, suddenly engulfed in flames, collapses charred to the ground. And then he hears the shouts from behind the palisade. "We're being attacked! Get ready!" He sees men running up to the arrow slits, placing crossbows against them, aiming outwards at his allies. But just as he's preparing to make a dash to jump the wall and jump in amongst the archers, he sees someone run around the wall. A man with a shield in one hand and an axe in the other, with the familiar look of a Scarpy exile. And Upvachni runs out, first into the fray. And Tortuga sees his target. Dashing from the shadows, he runs up to the Upvachni and takes the initiative, catching the man off guard. He strikes the man once, twice, and the third time he sends the man ringing, stunning him for just a moment. The Upvachni's eyes clear up as he sees this man daring to fight him unarmed, and smiles. "Well done, a fair fight." He strikes out with his blade, catching Tortuga hard in the side and wrenching a splatter of blood. Tortuga begins backpedaling, but the man pushes up harder, striking again and again. Tortuga can deflect one strike, catch another on his wrist, feeling a bite that is not as painful. And then he lashes out again at this man, trying to drive him back. He feels ribs crack, bones in the jaw break, but the Upvachni only laughs, excited for this bloody fight. Eventually, Tortuga feels the strike of the shield against one of his knees, causing a leg to give out. And as the man raises the axe above his head, Tortuga looks up as a dagger flies through the winds and catches the man in the throat. A strange, ceremonial-style dagger. White and red. Wrenches from the man's throat, floating beside him as he collapses to the ground, dead. Glancing back, Tortuga sees Pharaoh, hand held aloft, commanding the dagger as it moves. He gives her a nod as Tortuga dashes towards the palisade wall, catches on the bark with one of his feet, and sends himself flying up into the air onto the top of the wall. He looks down and sees 3 men with crossbows pointed outwards towards the party, retraining on Pharaoh. And he sees 3 men with spears guarding the edges of the small palisade. Glancing to his right, he sees a second palisade nearby with another 6 bandits also taking aim. Tortuga knows he has to stop this before they rain down death on the party that has now broken cover and is running towards this position. He jumps down from the wall, landing amongst the archers, and is immediately filled with regret as the 3 spearmen start stabbing towards him. Pharaoh suddenly is pinned down by the 3 archers coming from the second palisade, their bolts flying through the air. She is struck once, twice, and finds herself falling to the ground to get some cover. As the hail of bolts begin to overtake her, she begins to hear the sound of metal pinging against metal, and a bit of darkness falls across her as she sees Perch run up in front of her, holding out an arm to give her greater cover. "You should probably stay behind me," he says, a darkness filling his voice, as Pharaoh begins to see shadows leaking through his visor between the joints of his metal. "I'll handle as much of this as I can." A rain of arrows begin pinging off his armor. Some appear to find gaps, but are thrown aside by the shadows leaking from them. Perch begins to make a slow march towards the archers, taking what cover he can between the trees and pulling much of the attention away from Pharaoh. Tortuga is in a panic. 3 spearmen stabbing at him is a lot for him to handle, and 2 of the archers are now turning away from the wall and begin to take aim at his back. Suddenly, he feels the opening in his own defenses as a crossbow levels at him and sneers. "Good night," he says, as suddenly a bolt appears in the archer's neck, and he collapses to the ground. Looking up, Tortuga is shocked to see Rassmusen standing atop the palisade wall, a crossbow in one hand and a whip in the other. "What, you thought you're the only one who knows how to climb a wall?" he says, as he lashes down with the whip, catching a spear that was being driven towards Tortuga in it and drawing it aside. "You're not the only one who's tough here." Rassmusen begins distracting with his whip and firing with his crossbow, pulling half of the soldiers away from Tortuga, giving him a better opening. But here, one of the spearmen drops their spears and begins running away. Tortuga's eyes narrow. That is not good. As Tortuga takes off after this man, he feels one spear tear into his side, but he moves past it. This man cannot be let loose to warn anyone. He makes a tackle into the man, driving him to the ground, takes his hand around the man's neck, and twists his chin to the side, snapping it. Pharaoh's dagger flies into the group of spearmen who have broken from the second position and are running to reinforce the first. They begin stabbing at the dagger, trying to stop its motions, but they cannot find purchase anywhere. By the time they realize they cannot fight the enchanted weapon that now flies through them all, Perch has finally made it to the front line and sticks himself in the middle of the 3 of them, preventing them from moving towards Rassmusen and Tortuga. But from here, the archers now have a clear shot, and he begins to hear arrows pinging off his armor and feel the pain as some of them find a gap or 2 as the spears begin pinning him in place. Perch can take quite a bit of punishment but he is being overwhelmed. Until the moment that Valandria steps around the second palisade, bringing her two hands down, her thumbs connect, as she unleashes a straight gout of flame down the wall's line, burning 3 of the raiders in an instant. Everything stops as the roar of the flames grow quiet, and the 3 drop cindered to the ground. In that moment, all of the bandits quit the fight. Dropping their spears or crossbows, everyone darts away, running further into the woods. "We can't let them run," Rassmusen states. "I'll warn the rest of the camp." As he states this, he pulls up his crossbow and starts taking 1 shot, 2 shots at the retreating. 4 men run into the woods, trying to dart away. One of them goes still as 2 bolts find his back, and he collapses to the ground. Tortuga gets up and darts after one of them, performing a sliding leg tackle to get him to collapse, and then driving himself on top of him to prevent him from getting up again. Valandria prepares a firebolt and unleashes it through the trees, burning a hole through the back of one of them. But the 4th disappears and is gone. "Fuck," Rassmusen states. "Well, that can't be good. I think they're about to get warned." Then they hear a yell as Tortuga pulls up the man he had tackled to the ground and starts dragging him over to the party. "Well, I think we can get a bit of a warning as well." They all gather around their new prisoner, dragging him towards a tree where they put him up against and begin binding his hands and legs. Hopefully, they'll be able to learn a bit about the encampment from this man. And so, the questions begin. As Rassmusen and Valandria begin trying to question the man, though, they learn he is a rather indignant and unafraid figure. Their threats of cutting off fingers and toes, of torturing him, seem to have no effect. He even at one point counters back. "Well, if I'd known you would be so into that lady, I might have offered you my feet from the beginning." Valandria finds herself very disgusted with the figure and steps away to prepare a dome that the party might take encampment in. A simple magic spell that provides a space that is safe and warm. Malachite approaches and begins also trying to question the man, but he seems entirely unwilling to give anything up. 10 minutes pass as the party is somewhat abandoned trying to threaten the man. The dome appears as Valandria summons it, and they drag him inside to keep him somewhat quiet to the outside world. Settling down, the party begins trying to think of what to do next. "You should all just give up and die," says their prisoner. "Or you can surrender to me. I'll make sure to show you all a good time." "Doesn't matter what some of this baffling magic shit you can do. You're all fucking dead already." Valandria's eyes narrow for a moment. Baffling magic. She has an idea. "I suppose you're right to some degree, my friend. I might already be dead. There's not much we can do, and since you're unwilling to help us, there's no real need for you. What do you say, everyone? How about we leave? I close up the dome, and we leave this man trapped in another dimension forever." "What?" "Oh, don't you know? If we all leave this dome, and then I dispel it, you'll be taken away to another dimension. you'll be trapped forever, alone and unable to die. That's not how magic works. Oh, is it not? I am a wizard who studied in Corella. And who are you? You wouldn't do that. Why wouldn't I? We're already dead, aren't we? And looking about at the strange magic dome that this man has never seen before, with some of the magics he has seen all being cruel, violent, and horrifying. The man immediately begins trying to crawl while hogtied out of the dome. "You won't delete me! No!" he starts saying, trying to crawl desperately by bouncing his chest up and down, biting into the ground, doing anything he can to crawl away. Valandria finds a moment of trying to fight back a deep sigh for these poor, uneducated folk. How about you simply answer some of our questions then, and we won't be forced to leave you here. The man's attempts to crawl stop as Malachite's back settles down on him, using him as a reclining pillow. Fine, fuck you. What do you want? How many are there? Where are they? What defenses do you use? Tell us everything. Fine. Our camp is just another mile that way, he says. There's another, 20 of us or so? And fucking what? Tell us about the man with the sword. That's starting to make a bit more sense then. Yeah, I've got no clue who that crazy Sethic fuck is. Sethic? Yes, the bandit says. That's what everyone called him. Showed up one day while our boss was just having us hang around. Fucker put that sword through him, set the man on fire, then drew it out and told us all we worked for him now. What? Yeah, no, that all happened and fucking we came marching out here to Diverfia by his orders. You mean you weren't coming to Diverfia before that? No interest in it. Hell, it wasn't my decision to be here. But you see a man with a green fucking sword that can set people on fire, you tend to shut up and listen. So, Sethic is in charge and was not part of your group before? No. Killed the old leader, promoted one of us to be kind of in charge, and then told us where we're going. Why? He didn't fucking say. Said it'd be easy money, so we came out here and we've been doing raiding. Well then, thank you for what you have told us, Malachite. That Malachite draws a dagger and begins moving towards the man's neck. No, wait, I can tell you where they buried everything. What? I could tell you where the boss is hiding all the valuables. Then speak. Untie me and let me get some distance so I can run for it. And I'll tell you where it is. Valandria looks around at the rest of the group. I don't like the idea of letting bandits go free. But what do you think? She could see Rassmusen nodding, apparently interested in learning where these valuables might be hidden. Perch and Pharaoh seem somewhat uninterested in one direction or the other. Malachite seems eager to kill the man. And Tortuga comes over and kneels beside Valandria, whispering in her ear. Honestly, if he doesn't tell us correctly, I can't outrun him. Laundria smiles and says, "Fine. We will let you go then, and you will tell us what you know." The party unties the man and guides him outside of the dome. As soon as they exit, he seems calmed by not being entrapped in that magical prison. He eventually walks a small distance away, ensured that he'd be able to make a run for it, thinking he'd probably be safe enough. Then he turns around. The boss had hired 2 Upvakni. You killed one of them, but the other one's still in camp. And after we'd go raiding, the boss would grab some of the more valuable items and would give them to the Upvakni. One night, when I was out taking a piss, I heard the sound of digging, but I couldn't seem to figure out where it was coming from, until I made my way over to the Upvakni's tent and realized the sound was coming from inside it. All the valuables the boss took are under the Upvakni tent. As soon as he says this, the man looks between all of them and states, "I'm free to go, then." Valandria gives a slow nod as the man dashes into the woods in the opposite direction of where the bandit camp should be. Remind me to use that dome trick sometime in the future. I seem to scare the shit out of him. A lot of people do not understand how magic actually works. It is useful, but sometimes. With that, the party gathers up their gear and begins slowly making their way deeper into the woods, till eventually they come to a place where the trees seem to end, where a massive area had been cleared. In the center of it, they see a circular wall of wood around what must be a small camp for the bandits. The camp is clearly on edge. Archers moving about, people armed with swords and spears near the front gate into it, and in front of the entrance, spikes have been placed, pointed outwards, preventing any sort of direct charge through the main entrance. This would be a dangerous approach. Anyone trying to run up to this warned camp would have to cross well over 60 feet of open ground that likely a dozen archers would be able to pick at. Not only that, but the 10-foot walls would, even for Tortuga, take a moment to scale and get over. And if they didn't wish to scale the walls, they would have to try to push through the wooden stake line guarding the main entrance. This would be a very dangerous fight. The party begins trying to make the best plan they can. Perhaps there's some way around the wall, but no, it's a full circle, and the clearing gives plenty of sightline. Perhaps they can draw some people out. Given the stake line, it's unlikely many of them would be willing to exit. Who knows? Perhaps they could try to turn these people against whoever this Sethic was. But then again, who knows what's going through the rest of these bandits' minds? Eventually, the party arrives Had an unfortunate decision. I think we just have to rush it, Tortuga says. We were able to clear out that outpost without getting too badly injured. This is a lot more dangerous, but it can't be too much worse, can it? They all glance back. This strange bandit camp, highly defensible and prepared. I don't like it much either, Rassmusen says. But we gotta try something, don't we? Alright. I'll go first, Birch says, checking the straps on his armor, drawing his great hammer. He begins to step from the trees into the clearing. As soon as he comes into view, the arrows begin to fly. The party all start a dash through the clearing, running towards the encamped walls. Melandria stays back quite a ways, Pharaoh too trying to make a bit of a distance. But as they start to watch, one man steps forward into the stake line and raises a hand, stopping the charging Perch, Tortuga, and Rassmusen about halfway across. We know that you have attacked our outpost, but you are here to try and deal with us. But we would like to make you an offer. The energy is quiet for a moment. We are done with what we're doing here. We've got what we want. I was hoping to clear off towards the coast tomorrow morning. If you all fuck off right now, you can live and state you got rid of us. And we can leave, having claimed what we've already got. The party looks between one another and back at this figure. They look him up and down and see he does not carry any sort of green magic blade. As they peer past him into the camp, though, they see a figure in plate mail, a bit of a ways behind him, standing in front of a tent, with a large, slightly greenish steel sword resting on his shoulder, flanked by two other figures wearing their own strange scaled mailed suits of armor, each holding a halberd. Listen, friend. We know you didn't come out here willingly, Rassmusen states. We know that someone threatened you to come out here and do what you've been doing. So how's about we try to clear things up in a bit of a better way? There's no need to fight for that man. So how about we just do things more peacefully and let us deal with what's going on? The bandit leader turns around and stares at Sethic, who shakes his head. Sorry. It seems like we're gonna have to do it this way. And with that, the arrows begin to fly. Pinned down immediately by a large onslaught of arrows, Perch finds himself under a great deal of fire before Tortuga dashes past him, pulling much of the focus. Valandria begins casting bolts of fire towards the walls where the arrows are coming from, trying to distract or at least seal shut some of the arrow slits. Tortuga, however, moves incredibly. His speed is unmatched here, and as arrows begin to fly around him, he catches one from the air and flings it in the direction of the gatehouse where the bandit leader stood, only to see it hit a new figure in the chest, the second Utvakni, who seems to be running from the wall. He dashes straight towards Tortuga, trying to engage him in a duel, as he yells back at the archers, "Any of you shoot into my fight, and you'll be fucking next." Unlike the previous Utvakni, who had an axe and shield, this man holds a two-handed great axe and begins hacking away at Tortuga. The Tortuga is able to slip backwards, avoiding these strikes much more easily. This Utvakni seems to be a lot less controlled, and Tortuga thinks this might be a much easier fight, until one of the strikes does catch him in an off-centered hit, sending Tortuga reeling. As Tortuga stands back from the ground and prepares for his next onslaught, a bolt of fire catches the Utvakni from the side. The man reels around, facing from the direction of the party that has used this distraction to sprint most of the way across the clearing, Valandria's firebolt being first to strike him. But as he turns, a crossbow bolt catches him in the leg, driving him to the ground. Then Malachite's longbow is drawn as an arrow sticks hard into his chest. Then finally, a magic dagger summoned by Pharaoh lies across and drives itself into the man's guts, carving him open. The Utvakni slowly turns towards Tortuga. "You fucking cheater," as he falls to the ground, dead. Tortuga redirects his energy and dashes towards the wall, and vaults himself upwards and over into the mess of bandits in the center. As soon as he clears the wall, the trio, including Sethek and his guards, begin moving towards him rapidly. As they do, however, several spearmen break off from their positions and start heading towards the main gate. Their job is to keep the moving suit of armor from crashing through the entrance. They move forward and meet Perch on the outskirts, driving him back, trying to focus him down. But then, something unexpected happens. From around Perch comes Valandria. 2 rapiers drawn, she dances between the soldiers, dodging one strike, then another. As an arrow comes from the wall, she holds up a blade and a magic shield is summoned, catching it. Rotating around her, it deflects another spear strike as she begins to laugh and dance in the way of a blade dancer. Perch takes a position watching Valandria's back, drawing as much attention towards himself as he can. But while they draw most of the soldiers, Tortuga finds himself pinned down as Sethek and his 2 guards make their way towards him. Then, as they see him backing away, step by step, they are taken off guard as Tortuga uses one of his back steps to propel himself forward, catching Sethek off guard. First, he strikes at one of his knees, the unarmored back end, causing the man to stumble forward. As he does, he strikes upward and feels his fist go right under the visor of the man who is leaned too far forward. He feels teeth crunch beneath his strike, stunning the man, Tortuga then begins lashing out more and more violently, unceasing. His onslaught against this man, Sethic, continues, hoping to strike this man down before he can make use of the magic blade. Pharaoh's dagger moves up and over the wall and begins going one by one, approaching an archer and stabbing into them. The archers begin scattering away from it. They cannot fight this incorporeal dagger, and so have to find new positions far away from it before they can shoot, buying both herself and Malachite enough time to cross towards the main gate. Valandria is a blur, a magically enchanted blur of motion that seems unable to be pinned down. She begins carving through one soldier, then the next, doing her best to avoid being struck at all. Though her eyes glance over to where Sethic and his two guards have surrounded Tortuga, and she sees one of the halberds fall between a gap in Tortuga's defenses and open a deep gash from shoulder to hip. Tortuga reels back in this moment, and Sethic takes advantage of the final opening. Sethic raises the great sword over his head. There's a slight humming sound as two green gems along the flat of the blade begin to glow green, a fiery energy growing in them. He brings the blade down as Tortuga slaps it with the palm of his hand, just barely preventing it from opening his chest. But as his hand strikes it, a gout of green flame erupts up the blade, engulfing Tortuga in fiery pain. In that moment, Tortuga sees nothing but smoke. He sees blood, violence, his home, the village they came from. And Tortuga accepts the burning energy as he lashes straight forward, driving his fist into the visor of the Sethic helmet. There's a ringing sound as the helm is driven from the man's helm. And beneath, Tortuga sees a tiefling with a dark maroon skin, glaring back at him in absolute anger. Tortuga then prepares a final kick, aimed straight at the man's throat. But as it lashes forward, one of Sethic's guards jumps in front of the man, pushing him away and receiving the strike to the side of his head, knocking him unconscious instantly. Sethic falls backwards and calls for the men to slaughter this impudent whelp. As a second guard steps away from Sethic, two other bandits join in and begin carving at Tortuga, driving him backwards against a wall. Soon, Tortuga begins to feel the blood loss from the initial strike, the pain from his burnt arms growing. There's almost nothing else he can do. Until he sees Valandria dashing between the bandits, arriving at him. "Do you trust me?" she says, reaching her hand out. "Roy?" Tortuga takes her hand as the halberd begins falling towards him. Unable to defend himself, Tortuga closes his eyes as his ears are filled with the erupting sound of thunder, wind sent out all around. Tortuga feels the ground disappear between his feet and then reappear as he finds himself outside the walls, no longer surrounded by men, Valandria beside him, I find removing myself from the center of attention can be very advantageous. Looking back at the position Tortuga had just been in, he sees the guard and the two soldiers knocked to their feet by whatever thunderous force had teleported him and Valandria away. And then Tortuga collapses. Unconscious, but still alive. The bandit archers find themselves hemmed in by Malachite and Pharaoh, who had flown over the wall. Pharaoh's magic blade pushing them back as Malachite slowly carves into whoever attempts to make a run for it. 8 archers are backed against a wall, the floating dagger coming closer, bloodlust in Pharaoh's eyes. Looking back in the direction of the gate, they see Perch, his great hammer, marching towards Sethek, the last of the great defenders of the bandit camp. Sethek wheels about on this new approaching armored enemy and holds his blade aloft, stabbing it into the ground. Come forth, servants. Rend this man. With this, dark green energy begins gathering in Sethek's blade, flowing into the ground as he seems to be preparing a great spell. I think not, Perch says, as he brings his massive maul up and brings it down on the horns of the tiefling Sethek, shattering his skull apart and driving him to the ground. As the hammer contacts, Perch prepared to hear the sound of bones splintering, but instead, there's an echoing sound, like crystal or glass being broken apart, echoing somewhere. As Sethek falls to the ground, his head opened, dead in an instant. The group of archers drop their bows and hold their hands aloft. What few bandits remain alive surrender as well. Their one source of fear gone, and the new source, these strange heroes, more than willing to put them down. They surrender, and the party is victorious. And with that victory, and only a few minutes remaining, I believe that is where we will be ending today's story time, with the death of the bandit called Sethek. And with the victory of the party over this group. I hope you all enjoyed a good old-fashioned story time. I know it has been a while since we've had it, and I am feeling it to a degree. I had never been this tired after a stream, but I think it's good to be getting back into it, to really build myself back up for giving you guys nice long story times. As I've said, though, unfortunately, next weekend I will be having family in town and might not be able to do a classic Saturday stream, though I should be free to go ahead and give you guys your usual Friday Mass Effect. I will be looking for an opportunity to give you guys something else whenever I can to try to make up for it, but we'll have to see how all that plays out. As always, storytime has been fun. Thank you, Teramon. Well then, with a few minutes left though, How was that for you guys? I imagine you can hear my voice is getting tired as hell today, but I hope I was able to keep up the smooth tones for as much of the story as possible. What do you all think about Sethic's weapon, and what was he about to do with it? Do you think the party is going to be paid well for this job? And what should they do with these bandits who have surrendered, especially considering the request of the villager to kill them all? And do any of you all have any other questions or clarifications you would like? We have a few minutes, and I'm more than happy to have good old conversation with you all. I don't want to be picky, but I know that the party isn't that high level, but they do seem quite OP. So, two members of the party are in fact extremely dangerous, and that is Tortuga and Valandria. Tortuga is your classic monk, very fast and very good at rushing down a single target. And Tortuga has definitely played him in such a manner, rushing Tortuga into some of the most dangerous situations, such as in this fight, and rushing down the Sethic bandit leader. Still, Tortuga was literally knocked unconscious by the fight, and only saved by Valandria teleporting him away from being slain in that instance. The other dangerous member, particularly so, why is he as fast as the freaking Flash? So there's two things. Tortuga is a wood elf, which means he moves basically one tile faster than any other character in the party. Next, he is a monk, which allows him to move another 10 feet faster than most other people. Additionally, he is a high enough level of monk that he is able to use a bonus action to perform an action called Step of the Wind, which triples his total movement speed. If Tortuga has the key points to spend and the will to do it, Tortuga can move probably about 5 times faster than any other humanoid that the party has fought, with the exception of Quickling. The other particularly dangerous member, especially for this fight, is Valandria, who plays a very rare class of wizard called either a blade dancer or a blade singer. I can't remember which way Dungeons and Dragons describes it, but we call them dancers in my game, and I'm pretty sure that's wrong, but it's what the fuck ever, honestly. And the unique thing about that class is this allows Blade Singer, yeah. So Blade Singers are allowed to cast when they have weapons in hand, and when they enter their blade singing stance, they gain a bonus to their AC equal to their intelligence and dexterity modifier. Valandria, at most times, has an AC, I think, of about 19, making her extremely hard to hit, until she decides to cast Shield, which for a round makes her AC about 24, I think. Meaning, when it's against targets that are doing attack rolls, she is almost impossible to hit. She still has a very low health pool and does not do much damage with her sword strikes, but she is almost impossible to hit with traditional attacks. If you were to use AoE spells or effects that require skill saves, she can actually be killed almost instantly by most spells even she casts, but her very high AC and movement speed make her very hard for bandits and other humanoid targets to pin down and kill. Add in the fact that you have Pharaoh, one of the most vicious clerics I've ever seen, Rassmusen, a character who dual wields with ranged weaponry, and Perch, playing a very tanky class in a fashion where he likes to stick himself right in the middle of shit. And this party is very, very dangerous against traditional attacking opponents, much like bandits. Against other mages, they might be in a lot tighter of a situation, but definitely against kind of this level of enemy, they are very, very powerful. I don't know, Tortuga. How often do you feel like you're extremely powerful in a fight? What I do have to say is the one advantage I do have is my friend Lotus Flower here loves to get crit. Tortuga's AC is very high, much like Valandria, meaning it's hard to hit. However, Tortuga likes to get critically hit for some reason. I don't think there has ever been a fight where Tortuga did not get critically hit, which deals double damage and can't be dodged. So Tortuga tends to end a lot of fights really low on health, simply because he almost always gets crit. Ooh, I sent a photo of my Warlock Patu to the Discord. Oh shit! Junie! I thought you were off doing an interview. How are you doing? Thank you for the resub. Oh my god, that is adorable, Marcial. I fucking love this dude. Definitely seems very magically oriented. I honestly don't know if I could say necessarily Warlock versus Sorcerer or Wizard, but there is some serious high energy to this dude. Well, this feels like a very high level magic user. Interview good? Hell yeah, Junie. Hey, Junie, is Pharaoh a drone? Pharaoh is a drone for Jesus. Hell yeah. No, I was just telling them about your love of the spiritual weapon spell. That is definitely the staple of Pharaoh's attack patterns. And I think Pharaoh tends to deal a lot more damage than she heals in a lot of fights. Except for when Tortuga stands next to her. Then there tends to be a need to keep him on his feet. Alright, y'all. Alright. But, I'm afraid we are. It's a nice ass spell. Hell yeah. But I'm afraid we are finally fully over our time. Sorry, Judy. I'm glad you were able to show up, but I'm afraid this is where I'm going to be calling things for the evening. All right, Marcial, one last question, but I'm going to be doing my closing speech. I hope to see you all Friday, but like I said, family's in town, so I might not be streaming Saturday. I hope you all enjoyed story time, and I'll be looking for a way to make up the fact that I might not be able to stream next weekend for you. So keep your eyes out to see if there'll be a time when I'll give you guys all something as a little bonus. I'm always happy when you guys show up, and I'm glad you've enjoyed story time today. But I'm afraid this is where I must say that unfortunate sentence of good night, everybody, and see you soon. And Marcial, if you want to get that last question on out. Night, good night to you all. Yeah. Which classes have familiars? The Putu has another Putu bodyguard who is an artificer, but also has an immortal chicken familiar on which he tapes dynamite. Well, Marcial then. Which class has familiars? Well, familiars are in 5th edition very easy to kill, but they can also be resummoned. So even when a familiar dies, they can be brought back real easily. Summon Familiar is a spell that most casting classes can learn. Wizards and warlocks, though, are the most common classes to have familiars, especially a Pact of the Chain warlock, who is in fact built around having a very unique and powerful familiar. So yes, multi-classers can definitely have familiars, especially if they take the wizard or warlock class as one of their main ones. But with that, I must bid you all adieu, and hope to see you all very soon. Good night.